What happens when a scientist publishes something wrong? This is actually really common and just part of science. If Dr. A publishes a paper, it will get peer-reviewed by other scientists. Those scientists will publish their own papers in response saying whether it was right or not. The original doctor may retract their paper if it's found wrong, or they can leave it out there in the wild but add notes pointing out where it was wrong. Science is pretty big on correcting stuff. When you talk about ruining your career with wrong publication, that's usually referring to deliberate lying. For example, in my field someone was caught completely falsifying data. They even had their degrees overturned, finding out even then they were lying. Obviously lost job and lost their license to practice. It really depends how wrong they are and how it gets found out. If you're being farcically stupid or obviously faking data, that might seriously hurt your career. But a lot of what gets published is sketchy at best, and most people will survive being wrong so long as they did the minimum work to check their data. That really depends on what exactly is wrong. First of all, vast majority of scientific work is not exactly accurate. For example, Newton's work totally ignores relativity, and yet we all learn his laws of motion. An honest work that was reasonably assessed that was later demonstrated to be not exactly correct? Not a problem. An honest but shit quality work? People would be more questioning the journal that published it. After all, it was supposed to be peer-reviewed. But if a scientist lies, fakes data, or omits data that disproves their claim, now we are talking about consequences. Other scientists publish papers that dispute the findings and show why the findings are wrong. The original scientist then likely retracts the paper. This is why good scientists get published in reputable journals. Those articles get peer-reviewed, and peer reviewers don't pull any punches. They are ruthless. A scientist my wife once said to me, "Every scientist wants to win a Nobel Prize. Since most know they won't, the next best thing is making sure someone else doesn't." Scientists are petty. I imagine if you realize there is a mistake, you issue a correction. It would be the respectable thing to do. This is why scientists, doctors, etc. who publish their findings on YouTube and blogs are probably full of shit. It's also important to note that not all articles need to be scientifically perfect. They just need to make scientific sense. A lot of times, articles are published as kind of a teaser to gain funding. It's like a marketing article. Nobody is going to take their 12-person sample size as significant, but the research is interesting, so maybe someone will want to fund it. Which activist is that? And how are you defining being wrong? Intentionally lying and being mistaken or outdated are both being wrong, but they are not going to come with the same consequence. People are wrong in science all the time. Being wrong is a huge part of how science even works. Science isn't a big existing rule book that's already written down and only smart people can decode. It's a fluid field where people discover new things and rewrite old ideas all the time. People are bringing up Andrew Wakefield here, which is a good example, because he didn't have his career ruined by being wrong. He had his career ruined because his work was fraudulent. A lot of scientific articles are bullshit. Various meta-analyses claim that around 50 of experimental results can't be reproduced by another researcher. Some of such articles get attention and are called out, but most aren't. In general, 95 of the scientific publications contribute next to nothing, so no one cares if they are right or wrong. I'd say, unless it's a comically outlandish claim or a political hot topic, no one will care if someone is wrong. Bad experiments or overstating conclusions? Nothing will happen, most likely. Your body of work will speak for itself, and if people can't reproduce or build of your work, you'll be found to be a hack. If you are falsifying data or lying about conclusions, you can get blacklisted from ever running a lab. You get things like the obesity epidemic. Ancel Keys made the lipid hypothesis, and the rest is fat history. A ton of scientific literature is wrong and not reproducible, but it all goes through review. Higher impact journals have higher scrutiny. They have a reputation to uphold. It won't ruin your career if you're wrong, but if you're deceitful, it will for sure. For a scientist to be published in an academic journal, they need to get it past the peer review board. That means a bunch of other scientists in related fields look at their work and decide if it's good enough to publish. If someone disagrees with their findings, they might write into the journal and that letter could be published. Scientists' research is mostly funded by grants. They also go through peer review in the grant application process. The real risk scientists face is not being able to get grants. If they can't fund their research, they can't do their research. They correct it. If it was a particularly egregious mistake, it will be a probably harm their reputation. But papers are not right or wrong really, so it's a strange thing for someone that understands science to say. Science is perfectly fine with mistakes. It's all about correcting your knowledge based on the best information. They get hired by Fox. they get the Nobel Peace Prize.